Okay, so we can start reading. Where's the top of this? I want to minimize this, but it's not letting me do that. Okay. All right, so basically, you can start reading from chapter 2, text 1, and I'll tell you when to stop.
Chapter 2, text 1. Sanjaya said, "Dear Arjuna, full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, but Asudana Krishna spoke the following words." Text 2. The Supreme Person of God has said, "My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy." Text 3. O son of Pritha, do not yield to this degrading impotency. This degrading impotency. Does not become you. Give it such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. Number 4. Wow. Arjuna said, "O killer of demons, enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counteract with arrows in battle men like Bhishma, Drona? Now who are worthy of my worship?" 5. It would be better to live in this world by begging than to live at the cost of lives of great souls who are my teachers. Even though this flattering worldly gain, they are superior. If they are killed, everything we enjoy will be tainted with that. 6. How do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them? If we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live. Yet they are now standing before us on the battlefield. Now I am confused about my duty, and I lost all composure because of my belief. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me what is best for me. I am your disciple, and so surrender to you.
All right.
I can find it.
You can hold that. All right. And so text 1 through 6, we're looking at what Arjuna is saying here. All right. First of all, Krishna noticed his mood, and then Krishna decided to respond to him. Then he asked about how these impurities came upon him, because he's a Kshatriya, right? And his duty is to fight. And he says if he doesn't do this, then what will happen? They will not lead to higher planets, because Kshatriyas who die in battle, they go to the higher planets. But what it will lead to is infamy, in that people will find fault with him and they'll laugh at him. So then he's telling him, do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. And he is telling him to give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. So he is appealing to Arjuna's Kshatriya nature. And then Arjuna again speaks. So first of all, he asked about the impurities and mentioned that it doesn't lead to higher planets. but to infamy. All right. All right. And then told him to do not yield to this degrading impotence, it does not become you. Again, he is appealing to his Kshatriya mentality. Right? Then Arjuna is saying, O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counter attacks and arrows with arrows in battle, men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship? So he is seeing then that there is no reason to be fighting such eminent persons. He says it would be better to live in this world by begging, giving up a Kshatriya mentality and Kshatriya dharma to live like a beggar, than to live at the cost of the lives of great souls who are my teachers. Even though desiring worldly gain, they are my superiors. So if they are killed, everything we enjoy will be tainted with blood. So it seems like, these are good arguments. Then he says, no, do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them? If we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live. And yet they're now standing before us on the battlefield. So at this point in time, he can't understand why Duryodhana and the other members of the Kauravas would engage in such a battle. So, because normally he wouldn't engage in such a battle like that. All right, but we know from the last discussion that this battle couldn't be avoided because there were many attempts to avoid the battle, and the Pandavas even said they would take 5 villages instead of part of the kingdom. They would just take 5 villages to rule because they were Kshatriyas, and the Kauravas they didn't like that, so they decided they would fight. All right. So basically, it's Krishna is appealing to his Kshatriya mentality. Now, does anyone see anything else in there that I didn't mention?
Only one thing, Prabhuji. I think that what Arjun is facing here in these is basically the bodily association has overwhelmed him, material compassion has taken over him. I think this is what most of the humans they face it when they are faced with a challenge, faced with a crossroad, and it's all about the material compassion and bodily association. So it's actually very relatable. And what Lord Krishna said there, I think that also applies to us also, that we should not yield to this degrading impotence, because everybody fears losing things. So I think it's very relatable, is what I think.
All right. Okay. So we have the first 6 verses covered in there, and then we will continue from that. Okay. So appealing to. All right, so we're continuing from. I know Lord Prabhu read 7, but go ahead and read from 7 onwards.
Continuing from text 7. Now I am confused about my duty. and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple, and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. Text 2. I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. Text 9. Sanjay said, having spoken thus, Arjun, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. Text 10. O descendant of Bharat, at that time Krishna, smiling, in the midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjun. Text 11. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Text 12. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these things, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Text 13. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes in another body at death. So the person bewildered by such a the non-permanent appearance of happiness and goodness, and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearances of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception during eon of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without resistance. O best among men, Arjun, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress, and is steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. Text 15. Those who are conscious of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no end. This they have concluded by studying the nature of existence. Text 17. That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable. Text 18. The material body is the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity, is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharat. Text 19. Neither he who thinks the living is a seeker, nor he who thinks he sees is in knowledge. For the self is not, nor is great. Sorry. For the self is not, nor is great. Text 20. For the soul there
All
is
right. Hold 1 second for me, okay?
yes,
Yeah. All right. Can anyone hear me?
yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out why I hardly have any volume on this thing. Um, I'm not. See. Alright, just give me 1 minute. Let me see if I can fix this. Okay, so can we test my volume now and see if it's better? Okay, for some reason I'm hearing you all very, very low. Let me see if I can fix that somehow.
I don't hear any change in your voice. Like, I mean, it's sounding exactly the same as before. But you're not able to hear us?
Yeah, I'm not able to hear you. Your volume is very, very low.
Really? Well, on my side, it's all max.
I don't know what this is. Let me see here.
Yeah, I have my output volume to max.
Yeah, because I can't see. It's saying speakers 100%. All right, and references. Advanced. I'm gonna try something. So let's see if I can hear any better if I try this.
वैसी होनी चाहिए कि हमें कोई नहीं देख रहा. It's between we and Krishna, है ना? तो बहुत बारी हमारे आसपास इतने लोग होते हैं, हम उनको इम्प्रेस करने.
All right, I can hear clearly on YouTube. I'm not so sure why I can't hear clearly here. All right, so tell me, what text did you read until?
Until text 20 probably.
Okay, so we were doing from 7 onwards. Okay, so 7, confused about my duty. So in 7 he's saying he's confused about his duty, and he lost all composure due to miserly weakness. So really and truly, we don't think it's weakness, but we think it's confusion in his mind. All right? So he's telling Krishna that he's confused about his duty, and at this point in time, he asks him to tell him for certain what is best for him. So he takes shelter of Krishna here. All right, and then he says he can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up his senses. He won't be able to dispel it even if he wins a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. So he has already said that if he didn't win this if he won this kingdom, he wouldn't be happy. So here he's looking at his happiness instead of what Krishna wants done. Okay, take shelter of Krishna, but then he's mentioning that he wouldn't be happy by the outcome. All right, so Then at that point in time he fell silent. Okay, and then Krishna, from text 10 onwards, he's smiling and he's looking at him. All right, so we went from text 7 to text 9. Okay, and then from 10 onwards, Krishna is speaking. Okay, and Krishna is saying, first of all, he smiled at him, and then he spoke towards. So he said, while speaking learned words, you're mourning for what is not worthy of grief. And those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So he's telling him that what he has is a mistaken idea. And he's mentioning here, those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So he begins to explain the understanding of the supreme, of the soul, of the eternal spirit soul. Then he says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And that verse is a very important verse. We can always look at that verse, which is Natu evaham jatu nasham, natvam neme janadipa, nachaiva na bhavishyama, sarve vayam ataparam. And we can try to learn that. That's 2:12, and that 2:13 is also an important one. All right. So then the other one, he mentions here. So this is the introduction of the knowledge of the spirit soul. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. And a sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So here he's mentioning the stages: boyhood to youth to old age, and then death. So he said death is not the end of our existence. This is what he's saying here. Death is not the end of... He said only a sober person is not bewildered by such a change. But persons who are not sober in their understanding, who are attached to materialism and the material situation, think that everything is ended at the time of death. Okay, and then he goes on. Okay, so up until 13, he mentions the spirit soul. Okay, and he gives evidence of the spirit soul. So here he's mentioning the spirit soul. Sorry, Atma. And the presence of the Atma. Also, he told Arjuna that he was mistaken because he's mourning for what is not worthy of grief. So it's told. Alright, so basically we can see the development here of the understanding of the spirit soul. And now, how high did you say you read?
Prabhuji, till text 20, I...
Okay, alright. Okay, so in 14 now he's saying, he's explaining a little bit of the situation of materialism. He said, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. And they arise from sense perception, O Scion of Bharat, one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So, all right. So then he goes on to say, O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress is steady in both and is certainly eligible for liberation. And here comes the word liberation. So this is what's happening here now, right? He's explaining about non-permanence. That's the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance. So the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons arising from sense perception. This is where it comes from our sense perception. So the beginning and end of things in the material world, or our attachment in the material world. Notice he mentions happiness and distress, right? He also mentioned this winter and the summer seasons, so that's natural conditions also. All right, happiness and distress will appear on our own body and mind, and it'll also come from other living beings. So these are the threefold types of miseries, and then the appearance of winter and summer seasons. But he's saying it arises from sense perception. So the difference between sense perception and Vishuddha Sattva, which is perception of the spirit soul, is what is being introduced here. So he's introducing that. And he says, O best among men, Arjuna, that person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress is steady in both and is certainly eligible for liberation. So now he comes to the point of explaining the temporary nature, and he's saying that persons who are not disturbed by that, they're steady and they're eligible for liberation. And then he says that those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent the material body there is no endurance, and of the eternal the spirit soul there is no change. He says this they have concluded by studying the nature of both. So he's saying it's not only I who am saying this, but the seers of the truth have already said that. And then on 17 he explains that which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. So, okay, now the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end, and therefore fight or descend from Bharata. So he's saying that they would come to an end in any case. So it's your duty to fight. And then he says, neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer nor the slain thinks he's not in knowledge, for the self is slays nor is slain. All right. And then he goes on and takes 20. For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existent, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So here he's explaining their spirit soul and explaining the spirit soul in different ways. So if we want to understand or we want to explain the spirit soul, we're looking from text 14 through 20. That's where he explains the spirit soul. Okay, so here. Go ahead.
I know that there is that story that has been repeated that the spirit soul can be equated to two birds sitting on a branch. One bird is eating the fruits of the branch, and the other bird is witnessing. Is just witnessing. The bird which is witnessing is the supreme Brahman, and the other one which is eating the fruits is like us. Is the spirit soul that Lord Krishna is talking about here? Is that the is that the witnessing bird, or is it actually both of them together? I mean, is it like our consciousness? It is
All right.
talking about our consciousness?
Now there's a little confusion there because there are two birds sitting on the same within the heart of a living entity.
Mm-hmm.
One is the witnessing bird, and the other is trying to enjoy the fruits of this material world. But the one who is witnessing is not the spirit soul; he is the super soul.
Mm.
He is Paramatma, who comes in the spirit soul with every living entity. He's always with the living entity, guiding him. He's the one who makes him remember his abilities from past life. He doesn't remember the activities of his past life, but he remembers, the things that he has learned. So like you find that a 5-year-old boy is playing the mridanga like somebody who studied for many, many years, or someone, there are young children who can recite the entire Bhagavad Gita or read it in one sitting and remember everything, So, this is coming from a previous life. So the super soul helps them to remember that, and because he wants them to progress. So the super soul is the personality of Godhead. All right, he doesn't exist in the spiritual world. He only exists in the material world. So he's not a manifestation like the Vaikuntha, like like the Supreme Lord of Vaikuntha, or like Narayan, But he's especially there in the material situation to assist the living entity. So that's not the spirit soul, that's the super soul. All right?
Okay.
All right.
And soul that Lord Krishna is talking about, that's the soul which is trying to enjoy the fruits. Is that right?
Yeah, well, we are spirit soul because he mentions that in text 10 to 13. He mentioned the Atma and the presence of the Atma, right?
Right.
He begins by telling Arjuna what he's mourning for is not worthy of grief. So then in text 14 through 20, he begins to explain the spirit soul. So you notice that he doesn't mention the super soul, but he mentions liberation. At this point in time, one who is in that situation and who can understand, actually in 10 to 13, who understands the temporary nature of everything in this world. He is ready for liberation. Okay?
Right.
All right. Lord Prabhu, you have anything you wanted to add? All right. So from text 20, all right. That's the last thing we looked at. Now, in text 21, he's saying, O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? He says, or the person puts on new garments, giving up the old and useless ones. They similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Right? Then he mentions that the soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble, and can neither be burned nor dried. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, and immutable. Knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. And he said, if, however, you think that the soul or the symptoms of life will always be born and die forever, you still have no reason to lament, O mighty Am. So now he's taking the other situation at that point in time. So he's giving explanations in 21 through 25 about a detailed description of the soul. So that's where he gives that detailed description of the soul. All right. So now from 26 onwards, he's taking the opposite view. And Lord Prabhu, can you read from text 26 onwards? I don't know if you lost him. I know he's still there. Okay, you're there. Okay, good. All right. For some reason, there's no sound coming from you, Lord Prabhu. Okay, it looks like we can get some sound there now. I can hear you, yes.
That's how you think that the soul, different life, will always be born and die forever. So have no reason to learn from it. Everything is world is sure to die. And after this, one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of religion, we should not forget. They created beings, all created beings all manifested in language. What we do is communication. And what can describe things some hear of things as unique, while others, even after hearing them, cannot understand them. Even well with the body can never experience. Therefore, fighting on the principle. Party. Happy are the catchers who such fighting opportunities opening for them richer student incurs sin or making your children just being people will always think on your ability. What could be more painful? Either you will be killed on the battlefield, or you will conquer the determination. before considering happiness or distress, God has me, victory or defeat, and in so doing, you shall hear him and
All right. Okay. So here, from text 26 through text 28, right? Krishna is talking about his position as a Kshatriya. He took that position from the other side, where all beings are annihilated. If you think, however, that the soul or the symptoms of the soul, symptoms of life, will all be born and die forever, still you have no reason to lament, because if you think he is thinking that we'll be born, we'll die, we'll be born again, we'll die again, it will happen no matter what he does, right? Then he says one who is taking his birth is sure to die, and after death one is sure to take birth again. So in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. And so that's 26 and 27. Then all created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in the interim state, and unmanifest when annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? So he's saying from text 26 to 28 that that point of view, being born and dying all the time, is not a big deal, because it's going to happen in any case. So then he goes on through from 29, saying that some look upon the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. Now, this verse 29 is a famous verse. It is Ascharyavat Paschati Kaschirinam, Ascharyavad Varati Tatai Vachanya, Ascharyavat Chainam Anya Srinoti, Shutvapi Enam Vedana Chaiva Kaschit. Some look upon the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. So, now there are a few famous verses in there, and I can bring them, I can point them out, and you can try to learn them so you can memorize them for later on. Okay? Okay, so now, then he mentioned that he dwells in the body can never be slain, and considering a specific duty. Can you guys hold 1 second for me? Hello? Margot? Yeah. Monica called me. You want to talk to her or you want to wait to listen? She's calling my phone.
Yeah, Bob.
Alright, I'm sorry for the interruption. So let's see here. Yeah, so he's mentioning that, we should not grieve for any living being, because we know this is going to happen. We see it happening all the time, and we know that it's going to happen. So why should we grieve over it? We should just try to do our best duty as we go along, right? And accept the fact that this is what's happening. So then he goes back again in text 31 and starts to mention his Kshatriya duty. All right? And so 29 and 30, he mentions why lament. Okay. And then in 31, talking about his specific duty as a Kshatriya, for which there is no better engagement than fighting on religious principles. So there's no need for hesitation. You got to come upon a battle and you fight, you'll either get the heavenly kingdom or you'll get the worldly kingdom. So then he says, O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors to the heavenly planets. So the Kshatriyas, they don't, say, okay, I will not fight for this reason or the other. They will fight in any situation. So then he's mentioned also, and if he does not perform his religious duty of fighting, he will certainly incur sins for neglecting his duties, and also he will lose his reputation as a fighter. And then people will always speak of his infamy, and that dishonor is worse than death. So you can sometimes someone is in a good position and all of a sudden they come upon there's something that stains their character and remains with them for the rest of their life. So then he's saying that the great generals who are highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only. So they won't consider that Arjuna is thinking in a higher situation where he wants to be compassionate to everyone. They'll think that he ran away because he's fearful. And then your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What can be more painful for you? So then he says, you'll either be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. So he says, get up with determination and fight. Basically saying, Arjuna, you have nothing to lose by fighting. So he says, do not fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so you shall never incur any sin. So even though something appears to be not so good of a situation, sometimes we have to do it, but we have to be very careful. We should always take advice from elderly devotees in understanding that. All right, so that's text 31 through 38. Okay, now text 39. Okay. Okay, Varun Prabhu, you can read from text 39.
39. Thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without curative results. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. Text 40. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Text 41. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. Text 42-43. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various curative activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. Text 44. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. Text 45. The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of material nature. O Arjuna, become transcendental to these three modes. Be free from all duality and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. Text 46. All purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all the purposes of Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. Text 47. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Text 48. Perform your duty equipoised, O Arjun, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga.
All right. All right. So you can hold that. So we mentioned text 39 to 41. So he has described this knowledge through analytical study. And now he's going to explain it. So first of all, he analyzed the situation and the understanding of the spirit soul. We analyzed the whole situation of, the Kshatriya determination and how Arjuna is going to be considered a coward and a weakling. All right. So then, of course, he analyzed the spirit soul and gave detailed explanation of what is a description of the spirit soul. So now he says he's going to do the analytical study. Right? And text 40 is another famous verse, and that is Nehavikrama Nashvashti Pratyavayona Vidyate Swalpam Api Asya Dharmasya Trayate Mahato Bhayat. Can you guys see that on your screen?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. And that is, in this endeavor there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. And that most dangerous type of fear is losing the situation of human life. Because human beings think that if they have to die and be born again, they're going to be born as human beings. But that is not always the situation. So in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the greatest type of fear. So those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. And, O beloved child of the crew, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. So it's the goal in life. Materialists have many, many goals, but the true goal in life is that one, which is to understand, accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to serve Him, and to understand the Spirit Soul. So then he goes on to say that men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, good results in good birth, power, and so forth. And being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say there's nothing more than this. So now he's talking about the many branches, the intelligence of the irresolute being many branched, right? And so he's mentioning the materialists and even those who are following the Vedas but for material benedictions. So in the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, that resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. Alright, so up to 44, he's mentioning the resolute determination and the difference between the materialistic determination and spiritual pursuit. Alright? But then he begins to mention about the three modes of material nature, and saying that the three modes of material nature, the Vedas deal mainly with those the subject of the three modes of material nature. So you find that what happens here is Yes, so you find here that the Vedas dealing mainly with three. Uh, then he's telling Arjuna to become transcendental to the modes of material nature and be free from all dualities and from anxieties for gain and safety and be established in the self. So he's mentioning here that the three modes of material nature, if we become attached to the three modes of material nature, we will not be established in the self, but we will be established in the temporary situation. Then he says that all purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. So, similarly, all the purposes of Vedas can be served by one who knows the purpose behind them. So, people are they're studying the Vedas, but they are not understanding that the Vedas have a purpose behind them. In fact, they're leading up to the process of self-realization. They're leading up to the process of devotional service. So you find that he's mentioning here what this many-branch situation is, and he's explaining it in a little more detail. Then he says you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. And that's another famous verse. Karmani evadikaraste, ma paleshu kadachana, ma karma palahetur bhur, mate sango shtokarmani. And you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. So here he is saying that if you're a Kshatriya, you have to perform your duty. If you're a Vaishya, you have to perform your duty. But you can't be, you're not entitled to the fruits of the activities. So sometimes the Kshatriyas perform great activities, but they don't get the benefit. Sometimes Vaishyas, they perform great activity too, but they don't get the benefit of it. Someone else reaps the benefit. So he says, never consider yourself the cause of the results of the activities, but at the same time, don't be attached to not doing your duty. So basically, he is saying that we should stay, in whatever situation we are, and perform our duty. But if we are not, if we do a particular type of activity and we don't become rich or we don't become famous, don't worry about it. Just continue to do the duty because it's important to do that duty to be engaged. And then he says, perform your duty equipoised, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure, and such equanimity is called yoga. So at this point in time, he's explaining about how we should act. He mentioned the three modes of material nature and the irresolute and the resolute determinations. And then he's mentioning, beginning here with, you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of act. Never be attached to not doing your duty. So I think it's 8:40 now. We should actually stop here, and we're going to stop at text 48. All right. Anyone has any comments, questions, realizations on the subject matter that we can add to our discussion today?
One quick question for me, although I can have a longer answer, but Lord Krishna says that we have the right to perform our prescribed duty, and we should never be attached to not doing our duty. Is there some definitive place where the Lord has stated the prescribed duties, okay, for especially for somebody who is in grihast or these different varnashrams, like this is the duty? I mean, I can see the overarching principle that as a grihast, you should try to get people towards bhakti or towards supreme personality of Godhead. I think that would be the overriding duty. I can see that, but I'm just curious, is there actually a definitive place where the prescribed duties have been spelled out that you know of? Haribol Prabhuji, I think you are on mute. I don't know if you're.
Yeah, so that's a little later on in the divisions of fate and the explanations of the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. That's almost, I think, in the 18th chapter, the end, where it talks about, Samo Damo Tapas Saucham Chanti Rajavam Evacha, right? And that's the Brahmins, right? And then it talks about the Kshatriyas and then the Vaishyas and the Shudras together, all right? So they have specific duties, and they should perform their duties properly. Now, it doesn't mean that one can change his ashram, because devotees change their ashram from brahmachari to grihastha, then from grihastha to vanaprastha, and from vanaprastha to sannyas. So they change their ashram, and it can happen. All right, that's a normal situation. Of course, it doesn't mean that if one is a grihastha, that one is in a lower position. It just means that his duties are different. All right, he can still go back to Godhead. He can still become a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord. So that's not the situation there. All right. So basically, we have to understand what our duties are. So, like in the place where brahmachari takes the grihastha life, and it is said that he has accepted certain responsibility before the blazing tongue of Vishnu in the fire yajna. So he has to keep those, and that's basically what it is. Of course, in some situations, grihastha life is difficult, and there's separation, things like that. These things happen, but we have, in situations like that, we have to maintain our position of duty as much as we can and move along. All right. So it's not that we're gonna just in cases of separation, we're gonna jump from one situation to another and get married to another person and get married to another person and another person, right? That's not recommended, but it could happen, more than once. All right. There could be an error in the beginning, and that is why Jayapataka Maharaj always makes sure that when his disciples get married, that they check the horoscope, they check the astrological situation to make sure that they're compatible. And once they do that, then there's a certainty of the situation lasting properly. All right, Lord Prabhu, do you have anything you'd like to mention? All right, so maybe Lord Prabhu is not there. All right, so we can stop here tonight, and I'm gonna complete the notes, and if you guys want, I can put them in a document on the Vaishnav chat. Then, so that way we can have an idea. Now, as far as the famous verses are concerned, I don't know what your feedback is on that. If you want to learn those verses, if you just want to mention them as we go along, and tell you, well, okay, these are the ones that you should try to remember. And I was listening to a YouTube video by, how you call it, a Christian, and he was explaining how we should learn verses from the Bible, how we should go and proceed doing that. So, it's good, because in preaching to people and in remembering the personality of Godhead, remembering the instructions, we have it synced in our minds and our hearts. All right.
Yes, I would like to. Yeah, I mean, it's good that I've actually taken note of the ones that you pointed out. Yes, it would be nice to learn them.
Yeah, what you can do is you can print them out, yep, with the synonyms, and the translation.
Okay.
So the word the Sanskrit word for word, right?
Right.
And then the synonyms with the word for word, and then the translation, and you can read them over and try to read the understanding. And this guy recommends that you can do one per week.
I see. Okay.
You know, so I mean, if you can memorize fast than that, it's fine, right? But
Right.
one per week, and then you have the verses down intact. And so if you're speaking to someone, you could always say, well, Krishna says this in Bhagavad Gita, Natu evaham jatu nashram, natvam neme janadipa, right? Never was there a time when I did not know you know all these things, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be, right? And then you can remember, in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution. Neha vikramanashashti pativayana vidyate. So, we'll have those things that we can cite. So somebody is saying, well, you're speaking to me, but are you making those things up? And you say, no, those are given in the Bhagavad Gita. You can check any version of the Bhagavad Gita and see those verses there. The translation might be slightly different based on who is giving the translation. But this Bhagavad Gita as it is the purpose is to remember Krishna, the personality of Godhead. And so these translations are like that. So, all right, so I think we can stop here tonight because we went to 8:48. We had a couple interruptions. All right. So Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.